think we've got, okay, I'll start it up again. Thank you. I think we've got a good group in. So we're going to get started. Again, good afternoon. My name is Mercedes Witowski. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities. Let me start by thanking Senate President Sweeney and Senate and Assembly members of the New Jersey Legislative Disability Caucus, their staff, and today's panelists for being with us today. It's wonderful that so many New Jersey Legislative Caucus members are joining us. It's terrific to see the growing number of supporting organizations, individuals with disabilities, their families that are viewing today's meeting as attendees. I'll ask for some housekeeping to please remain on mute if you're not speaking, so that we have the best audio feed, as we are offering closed captioning and sign language interpreters, and we are recording today's session. You will be able to view this recording on the dedicated webpage for the New Jersey Legislative Disability Caucus, and I'm hoping that one of our session organizers will put that link to that page in the chat. On this webpage, you'll be able to locate the members of the legislature who have signed on as a Disability Caucus member. You'll also be able to locate the supporting organizations. You'll be able to sign up for mailings and submit comments or questions on any topic, including today's topic. The Disability Caucus serves as a bipartisan forum within the New Jersey Legislature for lawmakers and their staff to consider the impact on the disability community when shaping public policies. This can be accomplished through increased awareness and a greater understanding of the complexities of the service system and issues affecting individuals with disabilities. People with disabilities and their families and the supporting organizations that serve, support, and advocate for people with disabilities serve as a resource to the caucus by providing education and insight into the disability community. As we join for our third formal Disability Caucus session on housing, we can assure you that the 1 in 4 New Jerseyans who identify with having a disability and their families are grateful we are having this conversation today. In our first caucus session, we discussed the impact of COVID-19 on individuals with disabilities and their families. And in session 2, we focused on employment. And I've got to say that those were not one and done conversations. There have been ongoing discussions and work with legislative leaders to continue that dialogue. Just like I can predict this will not be the only time, and this has not been the only time that we'll discuss housing, because it's such a critical issue. And we know that where people live really sets the stage for so many other aspects of their life, like where they work, or what they do during the day. It influences how we develop our natural supports, and how we pay for housing sets the pace for how much we have available to spend on all our other needs. So affordable, available, and accessible housing, we know, has an overall direct impact on health, safety, and security. And research has demonstrated that stable housing has been found to improve health outcomes and decrease healthcare costs. So I'm really delighted that we're having this conversation, because we've done so much in New Jersey to access and address affordable housing needs, but we have more work to do. More work to develop and fund affordable, available, and accessible housing across our state. It's also important to note during this conversation that accessibility goes beyond grab bars and lowering shelf space. Accessibility for certain individuals with disabilities requires a closer review on their housing needs. And this can be the technology features that are best suited for the person, or the physical layout and space considerations. It also, accessibility can mean the flow of the dwelling, access to space considerations, the access to the building's general facilities, and the materials used to construct housing. Housing developers, architects, and landlords can really help in what they do by engaging with targeted tenants and social service providers to be the most effective in developing housing units that truly meet the person-centered needs of those seeking affordable housing. The Department of Human Services recognized the need for housing development in its recently announced Healthy Homes proposal. This proposal aims to develop 100 deed-restricted, subsidized, and accessible rental units for New Jersey Medicaid beneficiaries. DHS has earmarked $53 million within their proposal to the federal government in response to the implementation of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, and we anxiously await the response to that plan. Investments in affordable housing is a big component in addressing affordable housing needs. But we must remain aware of where we are making those investments, including the cost effectiveness, the long-term sustainability, the design elements, and how the projects meet the diverse needs of tenants. And for some tenants, the support services they need in order to remain in that housing. So to get us started, I'm delighted to introduce Senator Bob Smith of the 17th Legislative District. Senator Smith is chair of the Senate Environment and Energy Committee, and I'm excited to hear him speak to us about recently signed Senate Bill 1676 that allows hospitals to construct housing and provide wraparound services for individuals who are homeless or housing insecure. Senator Smith, if you would unmute yourself, and we will pin you to speak. Thank you.
My pleasure, and thank you for the kind invitation. As you pointed out, S 1676 has now been signed by Governor Murphy. It is the law of our state. And what it does is to allow hospitals permissively, they're not mandated, but they are permitted to get into the housing business, the housing healthcare business. As was pointed out in Mercedes' opening remarks, housing for the disabled community, for the homeless community has huge impacts on healthcare outcomes. And if you're in it, you should at least have the opportunity to deal with it. So Robert Wood Johnson in New Brunswick was the initiator. We started with a whole bunch of conversations about what can we do with regard to homelessness, because the theory is homelessness is a disease. It's a sickness in our society, and hospitals have been traditionally looked at as the source of solutions to a lot of these problems. And the more and more we talked about it, and the person in particular I give a lot of credit to is Jack Morris, who is the president of Robert Wood Johnson, New Brunswick, and who finds this to be a heartfelt problem. And he's been so blessed. He wants to see if there's a way for in his social activities he can give back. He and the other experts sitting around the table at several meetings said, you know what, one of our big problems, homelessness, is that the homeless don't get the medical services they need. They generally end up in our charity care facilities, which costs 10 times as much as if they were getting preventative care or wraparound services. And the more we talked about it, we realized the answer is let hospitals get into the business. And that being said, that also applies for the disabled community. This, especially as you said, the goal was to get 100 deed-restricted Medicaid beds. Let's get thousands. Forget hundreds. Let's go for the gold. And we can do that across the street if we can engage our hospitals, and particularly if we can show them and our elected leaders that by providing these services through a hospital paradigm will greatly reduce costs. We're going to get better health outcomes at lower costs. So I congratulate Robert Wood for working on the idea. We now have this new tool that's available to all of our communities. And by the way, the communities do well too, because first of all, you're providing opportunities for the homeless and for the disabled, housing opportunities. You're providing better health care outcomes. And the community also gets credit against its Mount Laurel obligation, which communities sometimes resent because they generally have to build 5 times more housing than whatever the affordable housing number is. So Moral of the story, we think this is a great new tool for our communities, and we hope that this community will be aware of it and start to lobby your hospitals to get into the housing for the disabled and homeless people in your community. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Smith. We're really excited to watch this model of housing and supports unfold in New Jersey, and we're here to assist in any way possible to ensure that this approach includes development that will meet the needs for those with varied disabilities. So I really appreciate your energy and effort on this and joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm now very pleased to introduce the next speaker, who is a tireless advocate leader for people with disabilities and a Disability Caucus member, Senator Anthony Bucco of District 25, as he shares his perspective on the importance of housing availability. Senator Bucco.
Thank you very much. First, let me say it is an honor to be in this caucus, and it is also an honor to join in this roundtable discussion today as we put our heads together to address the challenges that our residents with disabilities face in finding affordable and accessible housing, which is simply a basic human need. If there's one thing that we know, it's that the demand has and still does far exceed the supply for group homes, especially here in my district in Morris County, where the housing stock is so expensive. We can certainly do better around the state. I want to commend my colleague and next speaker, Senator Singleton, for his recent legislation that would free up to $20 million for the Special Needs Housing Trust Fund in the Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency, increasing funding for these projects to design the house and help individuals with special needs is essential for accomplishing the goals that we share. Just last week, I had the good fortune to sit down and meet with Morris County Housing Alliance. And the demographics show that in Morris County, nearly 50% of our homeless population suffer from some form of disability or mental health issue. So, we need to be able to fund these projects, and we need to make them affordable. And one of the things that we talked about in that meeting was the establishment of a countywide homeless trust fund, which would raise money through additional fees in the clerk's office to support the agencies that provide the housing and take care of the folks that are looking for safe and secure housing in this area. Another thing that I think we have to do is look for other ways. Senator Smith's legislation is one way of doing that. Another way is a piece of legislation that I intend to drop that was modeled after a piece of legislation that another senator had, late Senator Cardinelli had, which would provide 2 credits of affordable housing to communities that develop housing for those with disabilities. This is a way to attract communities and developers to build this housing, and it will increase the housing stock. These are some simple ways that that we can continue in this effort. The great thing about this caucus is that it brings both sides of the aisle together, and working together under the leadership of Senate President Sweeney, we can get a lot accomplished. We have already, and I'm confident that we will continue to do so. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bucco. We really appreciate your insight, your approach, the practical ways that you're looking at this to alleviate the housing struggles that people with disabilities face. And as always, we appreciate your unwavering support of disability issues.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce the New Jersey Legislative Caucus member, Senator Troy Singleton of District 7, who sits on the Joint Committee on Housing Affordability. Senator Singleton will share with us the significance and benefits of Senate Bill 1255, and that was signed by the governor also a few weeks ago. This legislation requires that certain realty transfer fee revenues be dedicated to special needs housing trust fund. So Senator Singleton, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mercedes, and it is indeed an honor to follow two of my friends and esteemed colleagues, Senator Smith and Senator Bucco. Since joining the legislature, it's been part of my mission to really think through and try and work to secure an access for housing for every resident. And it becomes especially important for our residents who deal with disabilities through the special needs housing. The focus of this new law, quite frankly, is to buttress the Special Needs Housing Trust Fund. Now, this trust fund was established in 2006 by the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. Unfortunately, we came to realize that the fund has since been depleted, despite its critical role in supporting housing projects for some of our state's most vulnerable populations. When learning about the depletion of the funding, it became critical for legislative intervention to find a source of funding for this important initiative. And I'm proud that this law was passed unanimously by all members who voted in the Senate and the General Assembly. This new bipartisan law, was stated, transfers $20 million from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to the Special Needs Housing Trust Fund. The uptick in real estate sales has made this an ideal source of revenue to buttress the fund. The law sets up an annual $20 million appropriation to this fund so that we can continue to make sure that we have the resources necessary to do all the improvements as necessary in the housing community. The New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Authority is dedicated to use the funds to make loans, grants, or other investments to finance or otherwise pay the cost of special needs housing projects upon terms that the agency determines. So the question is the question that is salient to us all is why, right? Housing accommodations, we all know, can be a challenge for residents with disabilities, whether it is providing special ramps or appliances that require to perform simple daily tasks. With this new law, we ensure that the trust fund is able to continue its works for years to come with a dedicated funding source. Frankly, as a state, we have a responsibility to assure continued operations of safe and humane residences for individuals who require supportive housing or extended care in a community residence. It is imperative that New Jersey develops more good, quality, affordable housing for people with disabilities that meets the needs and preferences of our diverse group of individuals within this community. This is just one step in that effort to be able to do it. And again, I was so proud that all of our colleagues came together to be able to advance this proposal. And it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure we do not let this fund get depleted again in the future, and we make sure it lives up to its noble mission. Thank you. And again, honored to be with my fellow members of the Disability Caucus. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Singleton. This long-lasting bill, impact of this bill on people with disabilities is, I want to just say, music to our ears in this space. We are very appreciative of the efforts placed, the bipartisan support, and the fact that we know that the real impact as housing is developed will really change the lives of people, people that we care about and the most vulnerable people in our state. So thank you so much for the work that you've done and your colleagues' work as we've just kind of gone through some recent activity in the housing space. And now we'll move into some additional conversation with the members of our supporting organizations of the caucus. And then we'll open up and have time for some more dialogue as we move through the program. So thank you all of our legislators. At this time, I would like to introduce Diane Riley. We are very fortunate in New Jersey to have Diane Riley as the Executive Director of the Supportive Housing Association of New Jersey. She's been in that position since 2017. She brings many years of experience to this position as a dedicated career person as a leading voice of New Jerseyans who are economically disadvantaged. Diane, we're so glad that you could join us today to bring your knowledge, your passion, and a self-advocate's perspective to this discussion. So I will now turn it over to a dear friend and colleague, Diane Riley.
Thanks so much. I'm very excited to be here today. And I really appreciate all of the legislators who came and what they've done over this last year, because we've had more successes in supportive housing and housing for people, building homes and finding homes for people with disabilities and challenges than we've had in a decade. So thank you so much. I just want to say that people with disabilities really want the same things that we all want, which is arguably they want a home that's clean and safe, and they want one that they can afford. There's nothing different about anybody with a disability that doesn't want that. We're all the same in that regard. And I do agree that HMOs and hospitals should be in the business, not necessarily because it's a disease, but because it prevents diseases. Housing, affordability, and safe housing prevents people getting sick from not having those simple things. So I definitely think it saves money, and we want all of our partners to be in this business. Supportive Housing Association of New Jersey advances and increases supportive housing, and we do that by developing partnerships, and we do that by working with developers and service providers and our partners throughout the state in order to do that. And our value, I think, is that we look at the big picture, not just one aspect of supportive housing and not just one type of disability. So supportive housing is a complex issue. It's a complex kind of housing. If you're a builder, you're looking at getting funding for capital development, for building that housing. And you're also looking at making a partnership with the provider to provide services, because you need both. And because people need to be able to live in their home, they also need to be stable, and they need supportive services and people coming in to help them live independent lives. It's a very complex subject, really the most complex. So when you look at these complexities, a lot of our people also are in the very lowest economic bucket. So they are people who need help, even with affordable housing, paying the rent. Most of the people we work with and we serve are in the 30% area median income, which is the lowest. So oftentimes they also need a voucher to pay the rent. And those vouchers also help the people who build and the people who manage that housing pay their mortgage to make that project work. The margins are that narrow. And then we need our Medicaid providers to provide the right amount of money to give to our organization so they can pay people a living and decent wage and more, because that is a difficult task. They hold people's lives in their hand. They are the thing that keeps people safe. They are the mechanism that keeps people safe. So we need all of that. We need all of that, and we need it all to kind of be balanced out and work together. And it's amazing. We have a lot of great people working in the field that amazingly get to do that and make it work. So let me just say what this budget did, not only for everything you've said, what it did in terms of paying people more wages, putting the money in the budget for that, putting the money in the budget for vouchers, and especially as Senator Singleton championed, and all of the people here voted for it, and Senator Sweeney and the governor and the lieutenant governor, that supportive housing trust fund is going to build a lot of homes. And we needed that probably most of all. So let me say a big thank you to that. I also want to say something about human services, and something that Mercedes mentioned is that we also really want to give a shout out to our medical assistance and health services, New Jersey Medicaid, because they did look at this additional money coming in for home and community-based services, and they went out on a limb and really proposed some innovative things, including having Medicaid pay for housing, which is something that nobody believed could be. But they did go out on a limb and do that because they know how important it is, how important funding homes is for people. So shout out to New Jersey Medicaid. So now why? Okay, so now we're here. So what do we need? What are we going to do? What would make things work better? So here's from where I sit. I always start with the people that use the services and need the housing. And I get calls, even though I don't have housing, and I wish I could provide people the support they need and wave a magic wand and help them. There's not a lot I can do because I don't have that housing, but I hear them and I listen to them and I know what struggles they have. So I take my cue from them. So let me just say, we could use uniform housing policies in the state, okay? There are many, many different kinds of vouchers, for example, and many different mechanisms to get those vouchers. Sometimes those are transparent and sometimes they're not very transparent. But we could use uniform market rates for our payment standards for vouchers. That would be a simple thing to do. When HUD changes their payment standards, all the vouchers should adjust to a uniform payment standard. We shouldn't have one type of voucher utilizing 2018 payment standards, if you can believe that, when another type of voucher uses the 2020 payment standards. It's simple things like that that could basically make people's lives easier and make it more seamless for them to get housing. So that's a nuanced thing that I don't think would be that hard to do. I could be wrong, but those kinds of things, looking across the board at housing, across disabilities, would really make decisions easier to handle, and it would make decisions much more effective. I do believe the biggest thing we can do is to have a council at a very high level to look at that housing. We should be able to invite those conversations on a regular basis. It would help us look at all the money coming in and how to leverage those dollars better, much as Medicaid did with this last decision, when they said they reached across divisions and departments to look at where they could best put those funds. We shouldn't have that be a one-off thing. That should be easy to do because we should have a committee or a council meeting on a regular basis to just look at these issues. I think that would be a simple thing that would make things easier. Accessible housing stock, couldn't agree with Senator Singleton more. We do a pretty good job of encouraging universal design when we build affordable housing, when we do those low-income housing tax credit projects. But there are a lot of rental properties that are not accessible and might be accessible if we encourage landlords to build it and we provide special funds to encourage them to do that. There is a lot of inaccessible housing stock in New Jersey, and we can increase the prevalence of people with special needs receiving housing and homes they can live in if we try to do more in that arena. Finding housing is a challenge. I know there's been some legislation lately that was very welcome, and that allowed people who were building and putting those homes into the market, they were forced then to post those electronically, which, if you can believe that, that wasn't a necessity before. But now those homes are coming up and those apartments are coming up and they are being posted electronically. But that's not the case for everything. We need to encourage that housing to be posted, different kinds of housing to be posted, shared housing opportunities to be posted, a place for even in group homes when there's openings. It could be done in a uniform way and in a one-stop way. We shouldn't have to go to a lot of sites to find this, or people shouldn't have to do that when they're looking for housing. Rental vouchers, where are they? Who, what different municipalities are opening their wait lists? That's supposed to be happening now with the Housing Resource Center, but I think it needs a little encouragement and more can be done in that arena. We definitely want to be able to find housing easier. And in the day of electronics, we should be able to do that. I also want to say that transparency is very important. I'm very happy to hear Senator Bucco about you looking at the trust fund, a municipal level trust fund, which would be fantastic. We would need to, though, know where those municipalities are. I can't tell you how often I get a call to say, what is a housing plan for a given municipality? How are they including supportive housing in their plan? Today, you have to go to every municipality and hope it's on their website, which is not the case. How many municipalities do we have? You shouldn't have to go to all those sites to find that information out. We should have one place where we post those plans, where we tell people where the trust funds are, to make it a little more transparent and seamless, to get that information that people really want. Even the advocates and the families want that, because they want to be able to go and reach out to those elected officials and those towns and work on getting their loved one in that housing ahead of time. Be prepared, or look at surrounding towns in order to do that. So that's exciting. We would need some kind of transparency to be able to do that. I think a council, the transparency, a one-stop, these are things that hopefully would not cost a lot of money, but it would be in the planning that would get us to a really fundamentally better place for us to be able to use all this wonderful money coming in. So those are the things that that I see in my place. And now, I can talk all day about this, but I'd really like to introduce a wonderful woman, Janai, who's here today. And I got to know her because she called for help. And I got to hear a little bit of her housing journey. And I think it really illustrates some of the things we talked about today. So Janai, I really appreciate you being here with us. So tell us a little bit about your life and your housing journey.
Thank you to legislators and New Jersey Council for Developmental Disabilities for inviting me to tell my story. My name is Janae. I live in Orange with my mother, a retired senior, and my 10-year-old daughter diagnosed with ring chromosome 13, a rare disorder. My daughter has developmental delays, is nonverbal, and has a number of medical problems. She's improving in her speech, communication, movements, and is breaking out of her shell through her therapeutic school, behavior therapy, and respite services that expand socialization opportunities outside of our area. Due to her level of care, my mother having her own health issues, and me being a single parent,
Janae, I think you hit the mute button, so you just want to. Thanks, Janae.
Sorry. Thank you. Our apartment options are expensive, and with low income options are limited. I was approved for Section 8 housing vouchers February 2019, but still I'm on the waiting list. Several years ago, living in a third floor apartment with no elevator was often challenging with my daughter. At one point, her doctor felt the need for her to have hip surgery that would involve a body cast, bed rest, then a wheelchair and physical therapy to walk again, all extremely difficult in an apartment with no accessible features. Discussed this with our landlord and a need to be on the first floor, but was told accommodations were not possible. Luckily, her surgery was no longer needed. The first floor move opportunity only came from a wire malfunction fire in the third floor apartment that had us displaced in a West Orange hotel, first for 2.5 weeks. This experience was especially difficult for my daughter living in one room, adjusting her specialized meals to microwave and mini fridge friendly, and Ubering to and from our uninhabitable apartment address for a week to maintain school transportation in the wintertime. Not spending Christmas and her birthday in the hotel was crucial, so moving to the first floor apartment in another building, our current location, was ideal. Section 8 rejected an emergency move with no exceptions. The pandemic started 3 months later, challenging our routine again and magnifying the health and safety concerns of the ground level apartment, of not being able to look out of or open windows to avoid car fumes, people near our windowsills, mold and temperature control issues, and limited building maintenance. Our landlord won't move us, so My mother applied a year ago to another building and location that would be a great change for us all and help my daughter's current social anxieties, but the application was denied without a hearing that was offered by them and requested by us. Thank you.
Thank you, Janae. Thank you, Diane. Diane, did you want to say anything before I just continue my thanks?
Yeah, I just want to thank Janae for coming today. She summarized that beautifully. I know that when she did move to various sections, she had to take an Uber to get her daughter the services they need. Her life is just one, struggle after another to just do the basic things that she wants to do to keep her child healthy. And then as a sandwich generation person, she also is working to keep her mother healthy. So, and yet there's very little we can do with this situation, unbelievably.
Yes, thanks, Diane. The work that you do is incredible. The insight, the leadership you bring to housing. Janae, thank you. You shared a story that we need to hear in order to have this conversation. You're a clear example in kind of what happens on a day-to-day basis that impacts the work that so many of us are committed to. So we only wish you and your family well and appreciate your joining us today. I would like to allow next two additional speakers. I know we're a little bit tight on time, a little behind schedule, but I would like to invite Norman Smith and Colleen Roche to join us and share their perspectives. Norm is the co-founder and associate executive director of Project Freedom and chair of the statewide New Jersey Independent Living Council. And Colleen serves in various positions related to independent living and is the chair of the New Jersey Personal Assisted Service Advisory Council. So Norman, Colleen, I'll ask you to say a few words.
Good afternoon. I'm going to ask Colleen to read my presentation. Colleen, are you yours?
Thanks, Norm. This is Norman Smith's presentation. Good afternoon. We have heard already about the struggle that people with disabilities have in finding accessible, affordable housing. But let me expand on that from the developer's perspective. Project Freedom is a developer and has built nearly 600 affordable and accessible apartments since 2001. But these units are not affordable for people on SSI without rent subsidies. Weekly, we turn people with disabilities away because they cannot afford the rents that we need to operate. This is not our mission. To solve this problem, more rent subsidies are needed. The State Rental Assistance Program needs increased funding. The Special Needs Housing Trust helps by lowering the amount that we have to mortgage. We appreciate Senator Singleton's efforts with this fund. Our 600 units are not nearly enough to address the need. The problem of production is more daunting, but can be solved by giving municipalities an incentive to obey their constitutional mandate. Before the demise of the Council on Affordable Housing, Project Freedom had municipalities inviting us to build. In fact, each of our 11 complexes were supported by the local government. But now municipalities don't feel the need to address their obligations. This needs to change in order to create affordable units in a sustained manner. Now, Colleen will talk more from a personal view. Thanks, Norm. My name is Colleen Roche. I'm a developmentally disabled white woman with brown hair, wearing dark glasses, a black shirt, and with gray flowers, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm grateful for the work of the Disability Caucus and its members. Legislation originating from this body has and will continue to impact the lives of disabled New Jerseyans in meaningful ways. Your work for and with our community does not go unnoticed. I'd like you to take a moment to consider a couple questions for yourselves. Do you spend less than 70% of your income on monthly rent or mortgage payment if you have one? Can you get up a few steps to enter the homes of friends and family? Do you have a bathroom door? As a power wheelchair user who has never been able to walk independently, my answer to each of these questions is no. I'd also like to share with you that I live in a standard market rate building constructed in the early 1980s before accessibility standards were federally codified. Yet a stair-free back entrance and ground floor units make this the most accessible place I've ever lived, even though it is by no means affordable or accessible to me. Finding housing is like finding a needle in a haystack. And when units do exist, they're most often found in new construction with unaffordable rents, even as a working SSDI recipient. Subsidies and vouchers must keep up with these rates by individual counties. As a lifelong Essex County resident, the demand for housing is incredibly high, and the supply is alarmingly low, and the pandemic has only increased this problem. My options are further constrained. No amount of willingness or ingenuity will ever allow me to live on a third floor walk-up in a single room occupancy. I'm on nearly 50 municipal waiting lists and the county waiting list. Most municipalities open 5 or fewer affordable units each year, which may or may not be accessible, I have no idea, and the waiting lists for these are a minimum of 2 years long. My position in these lotteries, when they've been offered, are primarily in the low thousands and up to 13,657. I assure each of you here today that my disability and the impact on my body marches forward with no regard to my position on the waiting list. My time here is extremely limited, and I would like to respect yours, but I leave you with this question. If the stability of your housing situation or those that you love were front of mind on a daily basis continually for decades, what particular skill sets and talents would fall by the wayside? This is the daily reality of people with disabilities throughout New Jersey. Thank you for your time, and I would really welcome the opportunity to discuss housing and other issues with any caucus members further at another time.
Thank you, Norm and Colleen. Thank you for bringing your perspectives and your insight again to this discussion. It is so important as we join with our caucus members to listen to you. And so now it's my honor and privilege to introduce the New Jersey Legislative Caucus Chair, Senate President Steve Sweeney. Thank you, Senator Sweeney, for your extraordinary leadership, and he will share with us now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mercedes. And Diane, you have a lot of legislators on this call, and I have staff on this call. And you should be giving us feedback on what we need to do to make things more transparent and what to do to make things easier to function. This is very, very personal to me. I remember when my daughter was born, people told me, you have to put your daughter on a list for housing. And I said, what are you talking about? She's a baby. They said, that's how screwed up this is. And it is. And, you know, Mercedes, I would like to look at developing capacity within each county to satisfy the needs of the housing within those counties, so that, you know, when it gets to a point where I'm not capable of taking care of my daughter, a placement opens up in Bergen County, and there's nothing wrong with Bergen, but I live in Gloucester and all my family's in Gloucester. So, you know, you don't want to create the hardship. Maybe I'm too much of an idealist, but I'm a realist, and that's what we need to do. I mean, Senator Singleton did a great job of that bill. Senator Bob Smith did another bill that was actually very good too. but we have a lot, there's so much to do in this field. And listening to the testimony of Johnny and Norm, and, and Colleen, just highlights the struggles. People should be able to live in housing that they can function in. But Mercedes, I really think we need to break this list down, this waiting list down within counties, and then charge counties working with the state as we bring on new development. Like here in Gloucester, where I live, there's a huge amount of development going on. So let's make sure our special needs housing is included in that. And so, look, I really value the work that everyone on this call is doing. And we're really talking about some issues that are obviously critically important to the quality of life of people with disabilities, because as someone said earlier, people with disabilities are no different than people without disabilities. They want the same thing. They want a quality life. They want an opportunity to be successful and enjoy life. So really, as a parent, I can see, when my daughter was employed, how happy she was, how fulfilling that was. And if not for the pandemic, she would be working, but she's going to go back soon. But Mercedes, again, we got a good mix here. The greatest thing here is it's very bipartisan. You have legislators that care a great deal. So you have our ears and we're ready to listen. So you got to show us what we do that makes it harder for you to do what you do. You know what I mean? It's that simple, because we do legislation. That's what we do. And let's start fixing this stuff. But most importantly, let's attack this list and start really, as we're developing in these counties, that we ensure that the special needs housing is, we build our stock, our housing stock, organically through that. So, I mean, again, I want to thank everyone that's involved in this. This is a critically important issue, and you have our ears. So now it's up to you guys to come to us so we can start fixing this stuff. But Mercedes, thank you for everything you do with this committee. It's one of the proudest things that I think I've done since I've been in the legislature. But, talk is one thing, results are another, and we need to continue to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sweeney. I have my notes, so you can guarantee that you will get them very soon. We heard about, you specifically talking about county capacity. Identifying capacity in each county is critical because we can't uproot people. They live, they work, they've learned transportation, they've built community supports. We can't uproot that for housing alone. So that capacity, that uniform housing policies is what we also heard Diane talk about, making sure that policies are consistent across the counties, across our state. That multidimensional level. I mean, I think we've started a conversation that we need to continue in terms of a high-level council, a high-level group that continues these housing conversations on a more regular basis. As I said very early on, none of these conversations are one and done. They are all conversations that we need to embrace and continue. Also then, Diane mentioned continuing to expand access to housing vouchers and streamlining that process for accessing vouchers so that people can locate housing and the resources that they need in a more streamlined way. And looking at those accessibility issues and having housing address accessibility that goes beyond grab bars and lower shelves. So I've got a good starting list. We're ready, willing. Diane's nodding her head. It might be bobbling off her head. So I know that she's willing as well. And this is just scratching the surface. So any other words, Senator Sweeney, before we just kind of move into one other area?
Mercedes, no, really, we're here, we're ready to do this. And again, you see the legislators on this call. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful, as bipartisan as it is. And like I said, it doesn't matter who gets it done as long as it gets done. So, again, we look forward to developing legislation to make this work a lot better. And now that I realize on the municipal level that it's a larger problem than we realize, we'll address that also.
Okay, thank you. Remember that you can go to the website that we've posted in the chat, the dedicated webpage for the caucus. Please share. There's a button there that you can share feedback on this topic, on other topics. We do see some questions and some chat that we will definitely weave and bring into the conversation. If you have a legislator who's not on the caucus, consider inviting them to be a caucus member. This is the way we're going to get this done, and we are very proud of the bipartisan support that we've seen throughout the formation of this caucus. So now, still related to housing, I'd like to ask Assemblywoman Joanne Downey of District 11 to join us. Assemblywoman Downey is chair of the Assembly Human Services Committee and a founding member of the New Jersey Legislative Disability Caucus. She's a dedicated leader and a champion on disability issues, and we welcome her here today to discuss her bill, Assembly Bill A4013, which requires certain group homes to install electronic monitoring devices in common areas upon request with the uniform resident consent and permit to use such devices, also known as the Billy Craze Law. So Assemblywoman Downey, it's great to see you, have you with us, and appreciate your joining the conversation.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. And I wanted to say, yeah, we're moving to it like this is a different area because this is like, okay, we definitely need housing, but we also want safe housing for all of the population out there, for everyone. Everyone deserves safe housing. So thank you to Senate President Sweeney and the members of the Legislative Disability Caucus for giving me a few minutes to discuss my bill, A4013, which is also S3301. It's otherwise known as the Billy Craze Law. For the past 3 years, my office has been working on this legislation to provide safety to vulnerable populations that may not be able to speak for themselves. And that's the major part of this. For those of you that may not know, Billy Cray was a 33-year-old man with developmental disabilities that was found dead on the floor of his bedroom closet in his group home in 2017. Billy had unfortunately suffered from institutional abuse since he was a child, and he was not the only one experiencing abuse and neglect in these homes. His tragic death made clear to me that we must address this issue head on. So we actually had hearings on this in my committee, and we wanted to make sure that we would take concrete steps to protect individuals like Billy from, and any other people like Billy from serious and sometimes deadly incidents they may face while residing in these group homes. So after meeting with stakeholders, all this, I can't even imagine that we left anybody. I hope we didn't leave anyone out. Providers, families of individuals with disabilities, and self-advocates. We created legislation that would allow the use of electronic monitoring devices, otherwise known as cameras, at the group homes and common areas and private rooms. And this comes with overwhelming requests and support from families that want to make their group homes more accountable for their actions and to provide additional protection and safety to the individuals that reside in these group homes. This also, by the way, comes from the DSPs, or the direct support professionals, who also feel protected by having them at times also do this way that they aren't falsely accused of injuring someone in the homes. So Billy's Cray Law is such an important piece of legislation because we need to create more systems of accountability to protect the loved ones with disabilities. And these group homes can be challenging work environments. And we understand it can be difficult to recruit employees who want to be there for the residents. So I appreciate the hard work of these professionals, both before and during the global pandemic. And I've heard great stories of employees that were outstanding and wanted to be in this field for the right reasons. But too often we tend to hear stories of the negative outcomes and unfortunate situations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And Billy Cray's Law is trying to prevent those from happening. So we understand the privacy issues that this legislation brings forward, which I know is a concern for many here, and we fully respect one's privacy. That's why the bill was amended to apply penalties to those that would use the recordings of these cameras for any unauthorized means, and to clarify that the purpose of the cameras is to record instances of abuse, neglect, or exploitation in a group home's common areas or private rooms. And I'm confident that this bill really does strike that right balance between giving people the choice to have cameras in their group homes. Remember, they have a choice to do this, while also respecting the privacy of individuals. And choice is the bedrock principle of this law. The bill does not take away the privacy from residents in the group homes who do not wish to be recorded. When it comes to the common areas, before installing any cameras, a group home must take action to determine whether the residents and their authorized representatives want to have those cameras installed. There must be consent from all the residents that live in the group home, and their authorized representatives. And a group home cannot require its current residents to consent to the installation and use of the cameras in the common areas as a condition to stay there in that home. And the cameras will only record video, not audio. The recordings will be retained for 90 days, and the residents or their authorized representatives can only review the footage upon request if they've experienced or witnessed incidents of abuse, neglect, or exploitation occurring in the group home's common areas. Or just like they have some idea, they feel like something's wrong because, of course, like the normal stuff, you get a call from, the hospital, your loved one is in the hospital, your adult child. Why did that happen? You deserve to know why did that happen. And so this is a really great way to make sure you can see, did something happen there, right? So when it comes to private single occupancy rooms, each resident will have the choice to install cameras. And if they choose, they can be responsible for the payment of the device and the installation. It also means the footage is private property so that the group home doesn't have access to reviewing the tape or moving the camera or managing or maintaining the device overall. And it can't make access to the recordings a condition for installing the devices in the rooms. So if you have a private double occupancy room too, it's important to know the cameras can only be installed with the consent of all the occupants in the room. And if necessary, a roommate can place conditions on the installation. But if a roommate refuses to have these cameras installed, it's going to be incumbent on the resident requesting these cameras to find another room or group home that will permit them in the private rooms. Finally, while the bill was amended to give the group homes a year to install the cameras in their common areas, I'll continue to work with the providers on methods to mitigate the costs in complying with the provisions of the bill. So, and that's what we've been doing recently, speaking to a lot of different people about the costs, including the storage of the actual video. And if necessary, I'd be more than happy to work with my colleagues in the legislature to provide funding to these group homes in order to have the cameras installed in the facilities. So to summarize, Billy Cray's law is needed to help those who cannot speak for themselves and to give the parents and guardians the ability to keep their loved ones safe in their group homes. And this legislation should be considered along with other initiatives, which I'm sure that this caucus will develop to ensure that the housing that we do provide for individuals with disabilities is safe and secured. And this bill will complement those initiatives by helping residents and their families feel more protected. So again, thank you, Senate President Sweeney, for allowing me to speak on this bill. And I'd be more than happy to take any questions or ever talk to anybody who wants to after this regarding this bill. So thank you again.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Downey. Thanks for sharing and giving us this bill's perspective. It's very much appreciated. I know we've heard from many families who are very concerned, and you have done a tremendous job in bringing voices to the table. So I appreciate that. Senator Sweeney?
Yeah, Mercedes, again, we're trying to stay on schedule. So, if anyone has any questions, if they want to forward them to us, we'd be happy to answer it. I'd ask, is there any other legislator who'd like to say anything before we wrap up? If not, listen, I really greatly appreciate everyone's participation. Our next meeting is going to be on October 26th. And, it's going to focus on another easy issue, transportation. Every single issue we're talking about is huge and difficult, but we're all going to work together to fix this. I am confident that we're going to start fixing this stuff now that we're all talking to each other. So again, Mercedes, thank you for everyone on this call. We're really going to get our issues lined up and the problems, and we're going to start addressing them. So thanks for the participation. Really, it's greatly appreciated, and look forward to hearing from everyone. And with that, I think that's it. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thank you.